My name is Paula Penfold. I'm an investigative journalist with Stuff, formerly Fairfax. A couple of weeks ago we changed our names, isn't she right? Every day should be International Women's Day, but today is International Women's Day. Thank you to Global Women for inviting me to be here on this really important issue of Press for Progress. What a shitty way to wake up this morning with the news that in terms of the top jobs in New Zealand, we are in a worse position than we were in 2004. We've gone backwards, at least 2004, that news said. I was on a plane a couple of days ago and was sitting next to this gentleman who was friendly, so we got talking about pay parity, as you do. You know, it's like, oh, the All Blacks, what do you think of pay parity? Shout out to PwC, who I think is represented here tonight, because this guy turned out to be a partner at PwC, and I was, it's a little bit embarrassing about how preaching to the converted I was. This is his field, right? So he gave me the stats on pay parity, and one of the things that he told me was, in this PwC research from last year, of 143 CEOs and country managers in New Zealand, 4% were women. 4%. So my hashtag for tonight is no bollocks, and forgive my crassness, but I hope you'll come to see that there's a reason for that hashtag. I had lunch in January with 9 women. I used to work at TVNZ 15 years ago. I left there, and all of these women used to work at TVNZ, and we've been trying to organise this bloody lunch for 8 years. Most of us are full-time working mothers, and you know how it is. There's just, you run out of time. We finally got together in January, and it was, you know, a formidable bunch of women sitting around that table. I think I did the maths, and it was something like 200 years worth of journalistic experience. These were intelligent, interested, curious women, and we sat around and we talked about that stuff like, you know how you do, as if we hadn't only saw each other yesterday, not 8 years ago. One of the things that we talked about was what was happening in our personal lives. There was one of us whose father has Alzheimer's. She's going through dealing with that. Another had a serious major career change because of a really difficult issue at home. And then there was me, whose marriage had just broken up after nearly 22 years. So we had quite a lot to talk about. We asked those questions in a caring, a lot of questions because we're all journalists, but in a caring kind of non-gossipy way. And one of the things that we also talked about, because we've been in this industry for a long time, was the issue of what it's like to be a woman in journalism. And it's a really challenging industry to be in, media. One of the ways that the manifests itself is in pay parity, and we all knew that. I knew that because I know that in the past I've been paid less for doing exactly the same job as my male colleague, and I don't know that because there's any great process of transparency. I know that because they're good enough, some of them, to tell me, because they realise it's wrong as well. So this issue of pay parity is a tricky one. I'm lucky enough now to work for Stuff, where the CEO, Sinead Boucher, is a woman. And looking at those figures today, I'm really pleased to be able to say that the senior executive team is 50% women at Stuff. And you can bet that that makes a difference to the culture at the company. For one thing, these women talk about what they want to do, and one of the things they've decided they want to do is find out what's going on with pay parity within our own company. And so there is a forensic investigation going on at Stuff right now about to what extent there is a pay parity problem, what are the data, crunching those numbers, and then figuring out the cause of the issue, to whatever extent it might be, and then most importantly, what do we do about it? So I'm excited that I work for a company that cares about this issue. And yeah, that stuff filters down to the coalface, to us female journalists working in the newsroom, because being a woman journo, it can be tricky, it can be challenging. We've had a bit of a taste of it just within the past week, because just over a week ago, Ellie Moore, with the support of staff and with myself as a consultant to the investigation, launched the Me Too NZ campaign. And I applaud Ellie for her guts, actually, because the pile-on has been huge already. But what happened was that she watched the Me Too movement take off, particularly in America, after the Weinstein allegations surfaced last October. And she watched a Me Too investigation be launched in Australia by the journalist Tracy Spicer. And she waited for something similar to happen here in a coordinated fashion. Ellie's the first to acknowledge that there has been some amazing journalism done around, for instance, the Russell McVeigh stories and the Human Rights Commission stories. But what she wanted was to be able to offer a coordinated outlet through which women and men could come to us and tell us their stories of workplace sexual harassment. There would be a triage process, and so you could get help if you needed it, rather than wanting to tell your story publicly. We had a meeting on Tuesday, so that was less than a week after this had been launched. 220 cases had already come in. It's not a big country, is it? 220 cases, and these are really disturbing, concerning, in some of the cases, systemic cultural workplace sexual harassment. So I was really bloody annoyed. And the first night, kind of the trolls came out to slay at 6:01. We launched the investigation, or the announcement of the investigation, at 6 o'clock. 6:01, the trolls started. I didn't even bother reading most of them because, they're kind of energy sapping. But then the biggest troll of all came out the next day, and he said, and I quote, "Fairfax's Me Too campaign, tasteless, tacky and tabloid." He accused us of launching it for clickbait, but I put it to you that he may be the most successful practitioner of clickbait in this country. This was Mike Hosking writing for NZME. He called it, I don't really want to give it much oxygen, but the purpose of saying what he said is so that you understand the context of kind of what a voice that he represents. He called it tabloid news at its worst, masquerading under the blanket of a good cause. I mean, I thought if the patriarchy had a payroll, he would be on it, right? He would be earning 12% more than any of the women. Yeah. Not that they would be on that payroll. He went on to say, so you ring the hotline and dob in the pervs. Their crack squad of journalists will investigate and bring to justice those who so richly deserve to be outed, shamed and presumably destroyed. Cool, he wrote. This is on a public platform. To be fair to him, there were many commentators who echoed those thoughts, but he has a really big voice. And he didn't want these men's lives to be destroyed. Too bad about the women's lives who had been destroyed, the jobs they had to leave, the stress they suffered. One has written about her hair literally falling out because of the stress and anxiety caused about the sexual harassment in her workplace. Then that sounds like my phone, actually.
It's not.
And then there was the witch, I don't know if you saw it was in the Christchurch Press, the Witch Hunt cartoon. It's within my own company, the Christchurch Press. The witch, don't even get me started on it. I mean, the first thing you want to say to this cartoonist is, witch hunt does not mean witches go on hunts. That's not how witch hunts work, right? So no, Mike Hosking, it will not be, this is what he says, it will not be about hearsay, rumour, innuendo, scuttlebutt, pinched bums and wolf whistles. That's what he thinks we're doing. No, this is serious investigative journalism. It will be triple cross-checked. There will be lawyers all over it. We cannot publish a thing until we were absolutely confident of the veracity of that information. This is not tabloid journalism. Before I blocked him, one of the trolls on that very first night said about Ellie and I that we were doing this campaign because we are attention-seeking whores. which is a word why that word? They always, the most vicious amongst them always use that word, don't they? And I think it's when they have no substantive criticism to make of us, they have to personalise it and they have to trivialise our work, which is very reminiscent of the story that was the hardest, most difficult, but most rewarding story that I've ever done in journalism, which was our campaign in the case of the miscarriage of justice that Teina Pora suffered. And as a woman journalist working on that case, I got, because I was the only woman on that team, the same kind of rubbish. I remember one commentator wrote, when we started this campaign, Teina Pora had been in prison for 20 years. But somebody wrote of me that I was doing this investigation because I was, and I quote, infatuated with the convict. I mean, how many more ways could that be wrong? No. We do this work because it's important, it's necessary, and there needs to be an outlet. My favourite fundamental, basic tenet of journalism that I hold very dear is that it is our job to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable, which is another way of kind of saying no bollocks, which was the point that I started with. No bollocks anymore. This Me Too NZ investigation is a serious campaign for serious reasons, and it is needed, and you can tell that by the 220 cases that have already come in. But we know we have our work cut out for us, and that's okay. I mean, they will continue to trivialise and minimise the work that we're doing, but that's okay. We are prepared for it and ready for it, and we will take it on, with gusto. There is a link to Press for Progress, because I think that this issue of Me Too NZ, the Me Too campaign, this issue of really widespread systemic cultural sexual harassment in New Zealand workplaces and around the world, is inextricably linked with the same power structures at play that mean that our pay as women is substantially lower than men's pay. Isn't it? I mean, these are exactly the same power imbalances at play. And so I would like to think that the Me Too movement and what we're trying to do here will hopefully impact on that related issue as well. Because I do feel that Me Too is giving us all as women, and as May did, I would like to acknowledge the men here too, because we cannot do this without you. It's giving us a kind of a rejuvenation. I feel like there is a change. I did women's studies 30 years ago. I've never felt quite like this before. In spite of that bad news this morning and the kind of feeling that we've gone backwards in some ways, I don't think anyone's prepared to let it remain that way. And I think it is beholden upon each and every one of us here to make sure that change that we're feeling in the wind, aren't we? I'm not the only one, right?
No.
To make sure that change is unstoppable. I want to end with this beautiful quote that I saw today from the writer Arundhati Roy. She says, "Another world is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing." Thank you.